elect Nixon.
Violent clashes.
One of the biggest surprises at Gamescom thus far is the reveal of Mafia 3. I'm joined here by Haden to discuss a few things about the surprise. Haden, the trailer just went like a few hours ago. Have you had a chance to look at the reaction to it?
Not really. I've heard a little bit here and there, and so far I'm pretty humbled by it. It seems like the reaction's been pretty positive, so I'm happy about that.
Now, Hangar 13, first game. Can you give us a little bit of background on the studio itself?
Sure. So I was hired by 2K to found Hangar 13, and we're really founded on kind of a couple principles. One, this idea that every player's story should be unique, or every player experience should be unique. And that really means that we want people to be able to sit down, and when they talk about a game, they can describe slightly different ways that they approach things. Maybe the narrative unfolds a little bit differently depending on how they do things, and we kind of want to hit it on multiple levels. And then the second is just powerful proprietary tech. We're building all of our games on our own proprietary tech, and that's what you saw today with Mafia 3.
Now, let's just talk a little bit about the story, because it not necessarily subverts, maybe inverts the conception of family and the perception of where you're approaching that.
Yeah, so I knew as soon as I got asked whether or not I wanted to work on Mafia 3, I knew that I did because, one, I believe that the franchise is so strong and it's so well known for immersive sense of time and place, and then again these really interesting stories with morally complex characters and about organized crime, which I've always been fascinated about. But I wanted to do something a little bit different. I wanted to kind of recapture the name Mafia to mean more than just the Italian mob, which is why we focused on a guy like Lincoln Clay, who's our protagonist, who is mixed race and he's a member of the black mob when he comes back from Vietnam. So that's kind of where we started. But then as we really started to develop Lincoln, the thing that was really interesting to us was this idea that he's an orphan. He's been searching for family his whole life, right? And so he's looking for it in the orphanage where he grew up, and that got closed down by the city. He was looking for it in the church. It was a Catholic orphanage, so he kind of stayed with the church for a while. Didn't really find it there. Didn't find it with gangs. And then so he joins the army, and the late 60s, goes to Vietnam, doesn't find it there, comes back, falls in with the black mob, and finally finds a sense of family, and then again has that kind of ripped away from him, and that's really what drives him for a lot of the game.
You sort of touched upon in the presentation about the idea of lieutenants, of these people become your family, but I'm just curious to know how we start being introduced to them, or how he becomes introduced to them in the course of the game.
Yeah, so he does recruit these 3 other criminals who are criminals already established in the city, which is our version of New Orleans. One of them is Vito Scaletta, who was the main character in Mafia 2, and Lincoln actually meets Vito really early on in the game when he's working with the Italian mob. But even from early on, he can detect that there's some tension between Vito and the reigning mob boss, this guy named Sal Marcano. Another character he meets is a guy named Burke, who is an Irish mobster who's been kind of put upon by the Italian mob, has had his knees broken, and has been forced to run a really small part of the city. So, and he's just, he's pissed off all the time and wants to strike back at the mob. And then the third one is a Haitian gangster, a woman named Cassandra, who eventually, wants to take more of the city for herself as well. And so that's really how Lincoln kind of entices or recruits these guys. Is like, look, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and 2, we'll share the wealth. I'll bring you in the fold. I'm the guy, I'm the boss, but I'll give you territory. I'll give you the ability to earn, as long as you help me take out the Italian mob.
Now, given this is not necessarily a clean slate, but again, you're trying to subvert things, I'm just curious to know what the importance was to bring back this Mafia 2 character, or whether you wanted to have that little connection to the previous game.
Yeah, it was absolutely important. I mean, for me, I always looked at it as we're going to make Mafia 3, and we're definitely going to push on who the protagonist is, and we're going to try and reclaim the name Mafia to be more than just the Italian mob, but it's still set in the Mafia universe, right? And I love the franchise. I know there's lots of other people that love the series. Vito's a great character. We wanted to follow the tradition of moving it forward in time, so that's why we decided to put it in the 60s. But from the very early on, we knew we wanted Vito in the story to tie it back to Mafia 2 and to make sure that it felt like one cohesive universe. And we reference other characters and other events, and there'll be some other surprises along the way, I think, for fans of the franchise. But you don't need to have played the other 2 games to enjoy the story and understand what's going on with Lincoln. We reintroduce you to Vito and all those things throughout the course of the game.
tell the truth, the only reason you guys switched to the 60s was just to use a classic kick-ass soundtrack, right?
There's no doubt. Like the 60s. So 68 is one of the most turbulent years in American history, right? Like there's no doubt about it. You got Vietnam, you've got the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. You've got the civil rights movement and all this social upheaval going on. And that's part of our backdrop, and that's really interesting because it creates this sense that like America is this powder keg ready to explode, and the city gets to kind of benefit from that and feel that kind of same tension. But then the flip side of that is the music is so amazing. It's this incredible collision of, well, and especially because it's New Orleans, right? So you get jazz and you get Dixie and you get swing and oldies, you know, what we would consider oldies, which were still quite popular into the late 60s. But then you get what we consider now classic rock, right? But was obviously new and cutting edge at the time. And then the beginnings of punk and, you know, like you heard the Kinks on the demo, which is like, you know, if I never would dream, I never dreamt that I'd be working on a game where I get to cruise around a city in like my badass muscle car, listening to, you know, the Stones and the Kinks and, you know, like the Animals. I mean, it's just fantastic. So yeah.
Well, we saw you at the end of the demo, you taking over the drug house, basically, the jazz bar, and giving it to one of your lieutenants. And is that at least one of the sort of narrative arcs in the game where you essentially take over the city bit by bit? And what becomes your stronghold then? Where's your base?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question. So the way that it works is that the game does have like a very strong curated narrative, right? But we always look at that as like tent poles along the way. And in between each of these big narrative beats, there's lots of things you can do. And in fact, the way that the narrative beats kind of play out will depend on how you decide to attack the city and attack the criminal ecosystem and tear it down. But tearing it down is only one half of it, right? So you saw that Lincoln went in and he took the cistern. There was lots of ways he could have taken that drug in, including going in or spending some time before he goes in to get information on the hideout boss himself in order to basically blackmail the hideout boss into turning everything over to him, right? So he doesn't even have to kill the hideout boss. So that, you know, that's one kind of component of it. But then there's how do you rebuild, and really it comes down to what do you give to these three lieutenants, and then what do they give you in exchange. So every hideout has a unique set of rewards based on the lieutenant. So I gave that in the demo. We gave that hideout to Vito, and we get a specific reward. I think in this case he upgrades his muscle for us, so his muscle becomes more powerful. The Italian mobsters that I take from Vito on my missions are more powerful. That's the only way to get that specific upgrade, is to give that specific hideout to Vito, right? If I were to give it to Cassandra, you know, she would give me another very unique reward, right? So you're kind of looking at it going, and they're kind of like almost like living skill trees. So if you know anything about skill trees, you know you can either go broad or go deep. And so if you really want to go deep in a skill tree, you got to kind of give everything to one mobster. Well, that's going to make the other two guys unhappy, right? But if you want to go broad and try and keep them all happy, you can, but you might not get like the pinnacle reward that Vito has to offer because you haven't given him enough stuff to warrant that, right? So there's a really interesting balance there.
So it's not just impacting particular skills, but it's impacting storyline as well in terms of your interaction relationships with these guys.
Storyline and the way that you decide to approach things. Again, we talked about this in the demo. You can definitely go into that cistern guns blazing and gun everybody down, but really you're going to want to do that if you have like an M60 or, you know, you have body armor, you've got a bunch of muscle with you. Well, those are things you unlock as you go through the game by giving over hideouts and even districts to your lieutenants.
Can you sort of touch upon the tech at all? What name of it and what you got cooking under the hood?
Yeah, so we haven't revealed the name of it yet, but it's all proprietary tech that we've built within Hangar 13. Some of it is tech that we've rolled over and have upgraded and improved from Mafia 2. So there was definitely a very solid foundation there to build on for new gen. But a lot of it is wholly new as well. We have a really solid tech team. Hopefully it shows in the demo that, you know, I think the lighting's incredible, the variety of the pedestrians, the density of pedestrians are all pretty phenomenal. And then the other thing I'm really excited about is that we've really pushed on the driving model. So Mafia 2 is well known for its physics-based driving model, which is fantastic, and it feels very different from any other games with driving as a major component. But we've taken that and we've kind of expanded upon it and blown it out in some ways to make it feel more like a Hollywood action movie. So again, in the demo, you see things like Lincoln ramming cars. There's a ram function that you can do, and shooting out tires and causing cars to flip. We treat the car as a weapon, so we have this move that we call the torpedo, where you point the car at a bunch of guys, and then you bail out of the car, and Lincoln pops up ready for combat because he's a trained soldier, and the cars go and blow up. So we've done a lot there.
I did notice one bit in the demo which I liked, that anytime you're taking a power slide, taking a corner, the camera does that lovely slight tilt thing, which is awesome. So there's getting that little cinematic flair, those little cinematic touches important for you guys to...
Yeah, and in fact, like our mantra around driving was we wanted to capture the sense of like Hollywood action driving, and not to the degree where we would do like crazy cuts and make it feel too cinematic, but just give it just that little bit that you feel like you're a stunt driver in an action movie, right? So we do those, some cool things with the camera, like you said, where it goes just a little off center. I don't know if you noticed, we have a rear view mirror, which like to me is one of my favorite features in the game, because not only you can see when you're being chased by cops or when there's a retaliation event and the guys are shooting at you from behind, but we also use it to like cut away to cool stuff. So if you do a car takedown and it blows up behind you, no matter where it blows up behind you, it shows up in that rearview mirror, and the rearview mirror gets bigger, for that split second while it blows up and then goes back to a normal size. So, and all that is just to like really immerse you into this and being Lincoln,
We just took a touch upon, obviously, artistic interpretation of New Orleans, and that particular era. Curious to know how that impacts weapons as well.
Yeah, so we are in, the way I always describe the franchise is it's historical Pulp Fiction, right? So we are grounded in reality. We do reference events and things that happen in the real world. Obviously, we're inspired by New Orleans, but the city's not not identical. We've taken some creative license, like put the tunnels underneath the city so you can drive around by boat and get to like the cistern, which, as far as I know, does not exist in New Orleans. Who knows? But yeah, so with weapons, it's the same thing, right? We really looked at it and said, okay, well, what types of weapons would a Vietnam vet gravitate towards, right? What types of weapons would the mobsters have access to, or the other gangs, right? Obviously Vito's going to have access to a different suite of weapons potentially than Burke, who's an Irish gangster, and that'll be different than Cassandra, who's the Haitian gangster. So we looked at that, but really at the end of the day, we wanted to make sure, we capture the gameplay functionality as well, right? So you need to have your shotgun, right? Close quarters combat, high damage, not very accurate at range. You want to have your Tommy gun equivalent or your automatic rifle, sniper rifle. So we've got pretty much every type of weapon that you would expect, and then a lot of variation. Like one of my favorite things, and they don't do it in every demo, because every demo is a little different, but there's a revolver that's like this crazy, like Dirty Harry type revolver. Yeah, and it sounds like a cannon every time it goes off, and if you headshot a guy, it sends him. It's like you're walking around with a little shotgun. So we have that as one of our pistols, right? And it's far more effective in different situations than the starting pistol, for example. Yeah.
So we've seen the single-player campaign. What about multiplayer?
We're very focused on building up Lincoln as a character, so the game is really an unabashed single-player game. There is no multiplayer, but that's really because we wanted to, again, focus on putting you in this role of Lincoln, really developing him as a character, really nailing the cover-based shooting, the physics-based driving model. And, for me as a gamer, that idea of I love multiplayer games, but being able to play a game that's a very curated story that I'm helping to kind of craft along the way, those are my favorite types of games. So that's what we're building.
And with Mafia 2 has some very interesting collectibles. Yeah. We're going to see anything similar in Mafia 3?
We can't confirm any of the details yet on the collectibles. We definitely will have, I think, some very interesting collectibles in the game. But again, for me, it's all about capturing the time period, right? So everything that we do, and reinforcing the character. So all the collectibles should be things that Lincoln would want to collect, right? Or things that remind me as a player about the time period. So that's really what we're looking at right now, is how do we get a wide range of collectibles that do that keep reinforcing the time period, New Orleans, and Lincoln.
Okay, so sort of wrapping then, obviously you've done the reveal. You'll be out of here at some point soon, hopefully. Right. You're back at the studio. What's the roadmap for the next few months at least? What are you concentrating on? And also, what is the game out on, and when can people play it? Sure.
So right now we're focused on just like making the best Mafia 3 game we can, right? So we're working on, obviously we're going to continue to develop the world, beyond what we saw today. and focus on releasing more information about the story. The story's coming together right now. We're working with our partners actually at 2K Czech, so some of the guys that worked on Mafia 2 on all the cinematics. So that's a really big push for us in the next couple months, is getting all the cinematics kind of done. Beyond that, we can't talk too much about our future plans. I can't tell you the game is coming in 2016 on PC, Xbox One, and PlayStation 4. So, yeah.
Listen, thanks very much for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay, obviously for more news on Mafia 3, and I feel there will be a bit, keep it tuned to Gamereactor.